Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and the conversation around the tables. My name is Jim Sayer. I'm the director of the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing our afternoon keynote speaker, Mr. Shailen Bhatt. Shailen brings to his role as Federal Highway Administrator a passion for improving safety and protecting all road users on Americans' roads, bridges, highways, and other surface transportation infrastructure, including people using them for walking and biking. He is also committed to transforming our nation's infrastructure systems to address transportation's impacts on our global climate while making them more equitable and fair for all. His distinguished career includes serving in leadership positions in public and private sectors, including the Kentucky, Delaware, and Colorado Departments of Transportation, the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, the firm AECOM, and as Federal Highways Associate Administrator for Highway Policy and External Affairs in the Obama administration. He graduated summa cum laude from Western Kentucky University with a degree in economics. And he considers most important in his life is being a good father and a good husband, though while he keeps his eye on his day job, he keeps his skates sharpened and his stick freshly taped so that any NHL team who wants to take a chance on him, he will be prepared. So with that, please welcome Shailen Bhatt.
You think he's joking. I'm not. I will say a state that will remain unnamed may or may not be trying to get an NHL franchise right now, and they need some transportation improvements that are critical for building a new arena. And I was like, there could be a discretionary grant available to fund said interchanges and improvements, but I may need to play for the team. So, but ethics is our number one priority, and I excel at the beer league that I play in here in Michigan, and emphasis on the beer. So it is great. It is great to be back here. I love coming here. It's the only place that I ever have to lie to my wife where I'm going, because she went to Michigan State. So don't put this up on social media, because if she sees it, I get in trouble for coming to the University of Michigan. But I love coming here. I love interacting with some of the very distinguished alumni. Dr. Robert Hampshire is someone who we work with closely and I think shares that passion around transportation and technology and the intersection there. I also want to recognize our new Deputy Administrator for Federal Highways, Kristen White. She's also worked, go ahead. I'm such a bad administrator. They're like, we need you to have a deputy and they need to go with you everywhere you go to clean up any problems that you create. But actually, she had planned to travel here before I was coming and the announcement wasn't made. So, we probably won't be traveling together in the future, but it's nice to be here. And since we both share a background with ITS America, I think it's only fitting that she is here today. So I do want to talk about the future of U.S. infrastructure and innovative solutions. And this is the transportation of the future as I think about it. And I love coming to research institutions where people think greatly about these challenges, thinking about mobility. But before I can even get to this, I want to talk about two things. This conference is about mobility. The last time I spoke at this facility, I was actually staying a few miles away. There was a snowstorm the night before. It was here. There was a snowstorm the night before, and I got up. I think I might have been the CEO of ITS America at the time. I got up to call an Uber to come to this facility, and because of the snowstorm, everybody was like, your ride will arrive in 47 minutes. And I needed to be speaking in 47 minutes, and the first 3 rides canceled on me. And I was like, oh crap, what do I do? And I started walking, And I actually ended up hitchhiking to the event. And it was actually two engineers from Toyota who I think may have recognized me and were like, hey. And I was like, hey, how would you like a research grant from ITS America? It's just how I roll. But they dropped me off. But it got me thinking, because there wasn't a transit option. There was no sort of like quote unquote mobility option. There weren't even sidewalks. I was actually walking on the grass beside the road, which is suboptimal. And I was just thinking to myself, what if I was a person, with a disability that prevented me from being able to, just walk on the side? Or what if I, what if I was just of more limited means and nobody wanted to pick me up? And what if it wasn't like a keynote at this facility, but what if it was a job? And if I was late, I would lose my job. And because I lost my job, I lost my place to live because I couldn't make my rental payment. We have a crisis of homelessness in this country right now. And I don't think that many of us in this room can truly appreciate how these things that we take for granted for a lot of our mobility decisions are just so easy for us. We can get in a car, we could take an Uber, we can, take transit in certain parts or get on a bike. But for a lot of people, freedom of mobility is not a given. And I think we need to really think about that as we're contemplating. It can't be for the few, it has to be for everybody. The second piece, I always focus on safety because I am passionate about technology and transportation, primarily from a safety standpoint. What are the outcomes, right? We always talk about the outcomes, not the technology, but the outcomes, whether it's reduced fatalities or reduced GHG emissions or reduce congestion. This thing that I do, I started doing it when I was a Colorado DOT director. Anytime I'm going to speak somewhere, I always Google search. Now their algorithms have changed a bit, so I have to use Bing. But I always go online and search whatever the state I'm in, and then traffic fatality or road fatality. And invariably, there's one that pops up. It's usually within the last couple of days. Well, when I did this morning in Michigan, where I live now, it popped up that a drunk driver hit and run just northwest of Lansing on Saturday, hit a group of 14 people. I think it was 2 families that were together. And of the 14 people, 2 are dead, 8 are still in the hospital, or maybe 6 are still in the hospital. And of the 8 people who were impacted by that crash, 6 of them are under the age of 18. And the youngest one is 2 years old. And it just drives me bonkers that in a world that has seen such massive transformation of our lives by technology, think of the way that you consume media, the way that you shop, the way that you travel, none of it is the same today as it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. We take Ubers, we Airbnb, those are verbs that were not nouns, 15 years ago. And yet in our world of transportation, we go on accepting 43,000 deaths a year on American roadways. And I believe it is past time. It is why I'm such an evangelist that we can engineer the hell out of the roads so that people go a little bit slower, so that there's traffic calming. We could put roundabouts in, but we are not going to get to 0 deaths on American roadways until we have a courageous and persistent deployment of technology. Nothing is going to prevent a drunk driver from hitting a group of 14 people that we can engineer into the roadways. Right? Like it just isn't going to happen. That's why we need the V2X solutions. We need the ADAS solutions. We need the autonomous solutions that are coming. And I would say that for those of you that are in this space, I think we get it. But as policymakers and the ones who make the decisions, we have got to create that safety and that outrage. We live in a very outraged country right now for the last few years. We should have the same level of outrage over the number of fatalities that are occurring on our system. Those are multiple deaths. And in a state like Michigan, Michigan needs every person that it has in the state and more, for the 21st century. We can't be losing people to idiotic hit and run, alcohol involved accidents. And that's one crash on Saturday on a day where probably another 115 people lost their lives on American roadways. Okay, that is the really bright and earthy beginning to my pitch, but I do always want to start with why. Why are we doing what we're doing. I am super excited, though, about the technologies that we're going to talk about. And it's a little small on my screen here, so let me see if I can make this a bit bigger. Well, I can't. Well, I'm going to look at it. So there's a reconnecting communities component. We don't build highways the way we did in the 1950s and the 1960s. Is that still up there? Did I just screw it up when I? Oh, okay, good. Wouldn't that just be me, Mr. Technology? And I realized I can't see what the heck you're looking at. So reconnecting communities, I think, is something that's really important. We don't build highways the way we did in the 1950s and 60s, and we shouldn't be finding just the cheapest and path of least resistance to go build them. In fact, here in Michigan, we have I-375, which if you've driven down there, it's quite a highway for a kind of a stub road that doesn't need to be there. They got a Reconnected Communities grant, and I know MDOT and the city are working to try to find a path forward for the community. That's going to turn back like acres of land to the city of Detroit. That's a great use, and one where, hey, we don't need to have this massive superhighway there. Electric charging. I think I was talking about transformation by transportation. When I was the Secretary of Transportation in Delaware, we put a EV charger out on I-95 back in 2011 in the hopes that some lonely Chevy Volt might see it and come in, because it was like one of a handful of vehicles out there. Today we have Class 8, like those big freight trucks that are actually out there because of advancements in battery technology that are actually able to be electrified or use hydrogen. And so electric charging, but today when I think about electric charging, I think about chargers. I think 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about inductive charging on the roadways. And I think here in Michigan, on Michigan Avenue in Detroit, they are, I see Tony is here, they're looking at a pilot around inductive charging. It already exists for transit, but can we charge vehicles as they're driving? Makes a lot of sense to me. Safe systems approaches, I mean, it doesn't make any, it doesn't do us any good to, just think about, one mode or the other. I was in at the University of Delaware the other day, and what was a 3-lane urban arterial is now 2 lanes with 10-foot lanes, and they've taken the remaining space, put some parking up that now shields a bike lane, and then put like a dedicated multi-use path there. So instead of traffic whipping by at 50 miles an hour through the heart of this campus, it's moving at 35 miles an hour. Now, I'm sure some suburban drivers are like, that kind of sucks during AM peak, but around the campus, it's totally vibrant, it's totally doable. It's kind of the difference between Ann Arbor and a lot of other places in Michigan. And if you look, Ann Arbor consistently gets rated as this amazing place to live in America. A lot of that is due to mobility choices. I know the mayor in Detroit working really hard with the Greenway and other options to try to make Detroit more walkable and bikeable, but cities of the 21st century are going to be the ones that really embrace all the modes. Mobility choices, we have a cool futuristic vehicle up there. I remember landing in Dubai a few years ago, and it was like I could take an Uber X to my hotel, I could take an Uber Comfort or Uber Black, and then it said Uber Elevate. And it was like an urban air mobility. I don't know if it was a chopper or a drone, but it was like $15,000. And I was like, as the president and CEO of ITS America, I should be on the cutting edge of mobility. So maybe I should take it. And then wiser thoughts prevailed. But we are not that far away from urban air mobility being a mode of choice. Now, we're going to have to think about that. What does that mean for our cities? Are they going to travel along the roadways? Makes sense to me. Do we need TMCs of the future where it's like a 3D, a third dimension of traffic management where below 400 feet where FAA takes over, we're managing that traffic because, nobody wants it moving across their areas. Freight and supply chains. When I was in Colorado, we did what I call the world's first commercial autonomous vehicle delivery. Other people call it the beer run, where the truck went 100 miles on the interstate with 50,000 pounds of beer in the back. I wish it was like supplies for Haiti or something more noble. It was Budweiser, not even good beer, but it's what they had. Today, there are trucks on the road in Texas and in Arizona that are completely autonomous. Now they have safety drivers in them, but they are getting better and better. If you look at the advances in LiDAR, in their sensing, it is a great application of technology. More of that is going to come, and supply chain is something we've identified as critical. I'm a huge proponent for vehicle-to-everything communication. We're going to be announcing our saving lives through connectivity grants here in a few weeks. We've got great outreach. Thankfully, the FCC is now granting more licenses for CV2X. We kind of got past that hurdle. And so, again, V2X is just something I'm really passionate about. And, as I said, the vulnerable road user component, if we have cyclists and other people dying on our roads, they should be able to communicate with vehicles. Climate resilience, every state in the nation right now is dealing with impacts from climate change. I had a buddy buy a Tesla a few years ago, was driving on 75 near 696, called his wife, and it was like, traffic hasn't moved, but what has moved is the water. It's coming up around the vehicle. What should I do? And you can imagine if you're in a conventional vehicle, that's a bad deal. Credit to his Tesla, it actually got him off the roadway and then died a few miles away. Like, just don't submerge a vehicle in water. But he didn't drive into water. The water rose up around him because the drainage system under 75 there couldn't accommodate that. We are, any transportation solutions of the future need to factor in the changing climate. And then AI. I mean, I am quite certain that University of Michigan is, looking at AI. We have AI being used to look at forest fires, and analyzing that sort of risk. I mean, to me, I think we have so much data, and people confuse machine learning, AI, generative AI, it's all kind of this layer. But to me, right now, for the 43,000 fatalities that we had on American roadways last year, when I started in transportation, we would get a report from the Highway Patrol in Kentucky that said that the fatal crash occurred on I-65 at mile marker 129. So it could have been within 1 mile on either side of that mile marker. We just had no idea, right? Now we're getting lat-long data. We're getting telemetry data off of the vehicles. We can figure out what caused the crash, or even more importantly, the near misses. There's just this ocean of data that is out there. So to me, that's a very early application that we should be doing right now. Let's look at the data of every single fatality in this nation or in this state and go back and say, here's where AI predicts that 25% of those could have been prevented. Is it a speed issue? Is it a pavements issue? Is it a visibility issue? And using predictive analytics to start to cut that down. This is not theoretical and 10 years away. Somebody is probably using ChatGPT or something else right now to say, how can we cut fatalities? I bet AI has some really good ideas that we should be deploying. I guess I am coming back to a low point here. This is Magnus White. I bike a lot in Michigan with my daughters who are 8 and 10. And I'm never completely comfortable doing it because I worry, particularly in Oakland County, which is really well designed for urban arterials to move lots of traffic, but not necessarily a great biking and walking environment. Some sidewalks, but it's clearly an automotive centric type urban layout in Troy where I live. I'm always worried that as I'm coming out onto Crooks Road, which is this one-way street, every driver I see as we're biking up is looking the other way because it's one-way traffic. They don't look to see, is there a cyclist coming? I don't blame them. That it is what it is, but it's the environment in which we live in. This is Magnus White, who is 17. I should be talking about Magnus White, and this also resonates with me because I was a Colorado DOT director. He was killed on a stretch of State Highway 119, and he was 17. He was competing. He should be competing right now as an international cycling star, and instead he was killed on one of our roadways by a vehicle that drifted across the fog line and hit him where he was supposed to be. And so this is why, again, I come back on the V2X technologies. Before it was about how do we get infrastructure to talk to vehicles. Then it was like, how do we get vehicles to talk to other vehicles? To me, it's an entire ecosystem. It's about vulnerable road users. There's all kinds of companies out there now, whether it's smart intersections or V2X for cyclists or pedestrians. I mean, this is not new stuff. What is missing is deployment at scale, and it's tragedies like these that we need to avoid. So we're pushing on it. We provided $283 million to help 44 projects in 19 states. But to me, it's the idea of the crash prevented, right? Like, we know that chances are your vehicle is going to be able to detect and sense that crash long before many drivers are. So how do we deploy that technology at scale? As I said, we've got some announcements coming up in a few weeks here, but I am just a fervent believer that this is how we're going to get to zero fatalities. Digital infrastructure, I'm a big proponent of digital twins in a lot of these infrastructure projects. A weird thing happened when I was, and actually it just happened again recently, but I'll talk about when I was the Secretary of Transportation in Delaware. We had a bridge hit. So at the time, we had one of our bridges closed on I-495 because of a bridge disaster similar to what you're seeing now around the country. At the same time, we got a call from the State Patrol. An oversized vehicle had hit one of our bridges and had closed State Highway 1. And our reflex reaction was the driver made an error. Turns out the driver did not make an error. He was in the position that we told him to be, in the lane we told him to be, but our department that issued permits was issuing permits, paper permits, based on the as-builts from 12 years ago, where the clearance for that bridge was 14 feet 6 inches. What they didn't understand was there had been 5 or 6 overlays of asphalt in that time, and the clearance that had been 14.6 was now, 13.7. And if you put a 14-foot vehicle through a 13.7 clearance, bad things are going to happen. That just happened in a state a month ago. And it just boggles my mind that we still don't have digital as-builts that are out there. And you start with the planning. We can do digital NEPA. We can do digital NEPA that gets you to digital design, get your digital as-built, and then it lives on. It'll help with asset management. It'll help us learn things about usage. Again, I go back to this idea of transformation of transportation. Technology is only beginning to scratch the surface, but we can do this so much better. Too much of what we're doing in transportation is kind of that 80s, 90s, and early 2000s version of what we consider to be innovation. It hasn't been disrupted to this point, and I think disruption needs to come so we can get to these better outcomes. But from a mobility standpoint, it's great that, we had ITS signs that say, oh, there's a crash 20 miles ahead. Now we've got, hey, your bus is going to be there in 9 minutes. Well, pretty soon we can tell the bus, this is the number of passengers on your route. Here are the lights that we need to sequence so you can stay on time. Here's the optimal way to use inductive charging so that your charging levels are going to be optimized for the grid, which is also an incredibly important piece. There's just so many elements here that we can just do so much better. And my encouragement to all of you is how do we push the envelope on that? So I talked about the generative AI, ADAS is important. Cybersecurity, we can't talk about technology and transportation without talking about cybersecurity. We can't bolt cybersecurity on afterwards to an existing system. It's got to be foundational. It's got to be there from the beginning. You don't design a system and then think about cybersecurity afterwards. So the more that these become connected systems of systems, and right now there's a healthcare system here in Michigan that's dealing with a pretty bad ransomware attack. It's happening more and more in transportation. I think Kansas had a pretty bad cybersecurity attack where they took over some of their ITS signs. We just need to be thoughtful about it. But I'm just a big believer that generative AI is going to help us transform transportation. So in terms of opportunities that are out there, I think freight is ripe for whether it's, platooning, we've been down that road a little bit, but I think, autonomous vehicles are out there. I think Aurora and Volvo just teamed up on electrification and autonomy. Work zone safety is another incredibly important element here. I think that if you look at work zone data for freight, these are change conditions that we can help with. Right, and then making the vehicles more aware. I mean, I remember seeing the LiDAR readings off of that auto truck, which then got bought by Uber ATG shortly thereafter. Very basic stuff. I was on the safety board of Aurora before I took this job, and the LiDAR picture that's being painted now is just, it's like night and day. It's like the difference between Apollo 13 and when they're going out into space today. It is that different, and it's getting better. And again, it's about sensing the environment around them. And then drayage and intermodal. I've had a benefit of going to a lot of ports around the world, Hamburg, Singapore, just some of these amazing ports. They're all mostly automated and electrified at this point. Now, we do have workforce impacts. We don't want to just rush to automation. But like, one of the things that they've been able to do is, when these cranes are going back and forth, if they go back and forth in the same spot, you get these massive divots in the pavement. But if you use a little bit of technology, they can shift the crane a quarter inch each time it goes back and forth so that you get even smoothing of the pavement and you don't end up with like an unusable pad in a very short period of time. Again, these are really basic things. I'm sure there are way more brilliant people in this room who have like other great ideas. We should be pushing on those. I talked about the inductive charging already. We've been researching all of this. We made $7.5 billion available for NEVI, $5 billion for NEVI, $2.5 billion for CFI to build chargers out there. We're going to hit the president's goal of 500,000 chargers in the next couple of years. But I truly believe that inductive charging will be what people are looking at. So how do we get the grid that is up to speed? We can build all the chargers and all of the inductive charging. What is going to be critically important is that we have the energy that is available for those chargers. And I'll stop there. That is my picture of my daughters that I always use so that if you didn't like my speech, at least you think they're sweet. But, every time I am out there with them, either driving or particularly when we're cycling, I'm like, is that, and I say this from a mobility standpoint, when I hear that car coming up behind me, does that driver realize how precious, this little figure is on the bicycle? Are they drugged? Are they, drowsy? Are they under, the influence? Are they distracted, which is a huge cause of these things? And if we can use technology to make my daughters or your family safer out there, we're going to get to that goal of 0 deaths on our roadways. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll move to the Q&A now. Thank you.
Got it. Sounds like it's on.
It's on.
All right. Thank you for that talk. Much appreciated. We have a couple questions that we had prepared for you. First one is, can you share with us what US DOT considers to be the main components or attributes of an equitable transportation system?
Yeah, I think this word equity has gotten a lot of, it's received a lot of what I would call extra attention in the last couple of years. And, I view it this way. When I was the Colorado DOT director, we were replacing a viaduct through Denver, which was crumbling. It only had 3 lanes. It was originally built with 2 lanes in each direction and a shoulder. To widen it, they got it to 3 lanes, but no shoulder. Every day there was traffic there'd be a crash, there was too much traffic, and beside this viaduct that was, just spalling concrete, there was a school, an elementary school, and the kids in this school that are on the playground, all they can hear is either traffic roaring by, or if the traffic isn't roaring by, it's sitting there emitting diesel fumes that these kids are breathing in, right? And today, if you go back to Denver, we actually took that road 50 feet down. We covered the expressway
with a 4-acre park. And if you go to that playground, that school, it's transformed. Like, you don't hear the highway, you don't know you're beside a highway, and it's just a more intelligent way of doing it. It's a more equitable way of doing it. Today, that is a poster child for reconnecting communities. At the time, though, when I was a Colorado DOT director, a bunch of people were like, why are you doing all this namby-pamby, public hearings and these sorts of things? Why don't you just send in the bulldozers? It's taken 10 years just to even get to a decision. Why can't we just build a project? And I would tell those people, and my daughters were just like 3 and 1 at the time. But I was like, if my kids went to that school, I would want a voice in determining how that project would impact them. Just like on 375, right? We don't want MDOT to go in and just say, oh, okay, we've made a decision, and here's what we're going to do. The way we do equitable transportation in the 21st century is we don't do it to people, we do it with people. And so, yeah, it's probably going to cost us a little bit more. I also get, because I've spent a lot of time in Singapore and other places, like, why can't you build that project like they did in Singapore? Well, there are advantages to being, powerful autocracies that don't have to worry about public involvement in every decision. But that's not America. That's not how we do things. And so whether it's making sure that electric vehicle chargers are not just going into wealthy enclaves so that, rich people driving a $100,000 vehicle can charge where they need to be convenient, but the person who buys the used, EV has a place to charge it, anywhere in Michigan. I mean, that's our goal. Or if we're going to build a project, we start with the outcomes of safety and the outcomes that we want to see from the project, and then we build the project around that. We don't just go in and say, well, we might need a 10-lane highway here in a few years, so let's take all the properties. I'll give you one more example. The Brent Spence Bridge, which we're actually going to fund and construct, it'll go to construction this year. When I was with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, we were talking about taking 75 to 100 properties and about 10 to 15 businesses, because it was just like this massive project. They've engineered it differently now. What we just got through NEPA is, I think, 8 properties are being taken. Now, it's hard to do a major project like that. It carries 3% of the freight of the country on it. But to go from like hundreds of properties to 8, that's what we think about when we think about equity in transportation.
Thank you. What actions or steps do you believe the younger generation of transportation professionals, some of which are here in the room, as well as the academic institutions that produce them, should take to develop the appropriate skills to be ready to lead in the future?
So your question is, what should the younger generation of... So I would say to my brethren, because I consider myself to be the younger generation of transportation professionals, like, I still think of myself as like a 14-year-old kid just trapped in a 47-year-old man's body. But I would say this, like, the great thing about younger generations that come along, right? When I was the younger generation, we're just kind of we were always rolling our eyes about, the older generation was like, you guys want breaks? I didn't get breaks at my work. I had to like come in and start working, and I got 30 minutes, and then I came back and we didn't talk. And I was like, well, how fun was that, right? And that's when Gen X was like, the next thing. We kind of got forgotten as Gen X. Like, everybody just skipped over Gen X, right? And now millennials and Z, and what comes after Z? Like Alpha. How the heck did you get to be Alpha? Like, that means a lot to me, right? But like Alpha, right? Like, I'm sure they will have success. Like, oh my God, my dad tried to game with me last night, and he can't even like use a VR set. Like, whatever it might be, right? Like, your reality, particularly from a technology standpoint, is hard for the older generation to grasp and to adapt and to scale, right? There's so much inertia in transportation. There's so much like, let's try a pilot, let's do a limited deployment. And so what I would just say is, don't have patience with people who tell you that's too much too fast. right? Particularly when it comes to safety, I always say now, when it comes to saving lives, we should err on the side of safety, not on the side of caution, because there's just too much damn caution in public sector agencies who are like scared to, oh, what if we try that and it doesn't work? Well, we're killing 43,000 Americans right now. So everything we're doing right now, we can safely judge as not being fully effective in the pursuit of safety. So I think that would be my my encouragement is, like take your technological prowess that most people don't have because, that's just what happens as you get older in your career. You get less technologically savvy and you get more concerned about keeping your job. And I say that as somebody who could be the former Federal Highway Administrator tomorrow if you put this out too broadly.
Thanks. What tools can MPOs and regional transit authorities, as well as others, use to evaluate equitable transportation solutions?
Yeah, so I remember when I was in Delaware, we brought in this company called Decision Lens. And basically all they did was they were like, it's basically a software ranking system that said, what are the outcomes that you want to achieve from your transportation network? How much funding do you have? And then it spit out the appropriate, here's the right mix of projects that you should build. Well, wouldn't you know, of the 114 projects that it was evaluating, the project that it ranked as 114 on the list was actually number one from a political priority, right? So like all the political people wanted this interchange in the middle of nowhere because it was going to spur economic growth, which was a great thing, and they were going to build some soccer fields and other things, but if you're comparing it to safety or other outcomes, it doesn't mesh. So the challenge for MPOs, and I used to be an MPO director in my career, the challenge for MPOs is you're trying to make data-driven decisions with political influence coming in. And some MPOs are great about giving the technical staff the space, and then others are like, yeah, but I need to get reelected, so I just need to bring home that project. And so what I think the great ability of technology, the great opportunity for technology is that you can truly start to bring in a political-free decision tree around these are the projects that we should be making. Here's the ADT. Here is, if we want to move to a more, so I'll take Oakland County, right? So if Oakland County, and it's a big county. I should be careful because I live in Michigan. If I take Springfield, any state, right? And they say, hey, we're kind of car-centric and we want to move towards a more multimodal solution, you're going to have entrenched interests who are like, no, my kids commute and my work, I just need to drive. But you could start to use technology to say, here's some alternatives that might have, provide more choices, right? Which creates the equity. Because not everybody has access to their own car. Our transportation system works great in this country if you don't have to rely on public transit to get to a job, to see loved ones, or to go get medical care. If you have a car, it's great. If you have to rely on public transit, then you're at the whim of public transit, and we can do better in this space. So I would just say start playing around with some of the tools that could tell you about the GHG reductions from different transportation choices you're making, the average daily traffic that would come, the safety components. Maybe you don't need speed. Reducing speeds is another big thing that I think that we can really make a huge impact on fatality numbers. So harness technology tools to start showing in your MPO the different alternatives that are out there.
Yeah, thank you. Last question. Any thoughts as to whether dedicated funding for a national deployment is possible? Grant programs are nice, but they force public agencies to compete against each other and within their own agencies where funding for basic road maintenance is often a challenge.
Yeah, so I don't envy the cities and states that are like, I have massive potholes and I have bridges that are failing, and you're talking to me about connected technologies. And I just have to take care of the basics. I get it. But there are states like Utah, Michigan, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and then even cities with like Detroit. This has been a huge push. Ann Arbor, that if you can clear the threshold, it's kind of like your own personal life, right? Like if you have a roof over your head, if you have shelter, if you have a pretty steady income and you're not worried about putting food on the table, you can then branch out to do other philanthropic things or volunteer time. So if there are states that can't do it, we get it. But if your goal is actual getting to zero fatalities on your roadways, you would be hard-pressed to convince me that you're going to be able to get there without deploying technology at scale. And so I think the great thing about the bipartisan infrastructure law is it's done two things. It is a generational investment. The president talks about that all the time. We used to have infrastructure week was a joke. Now we're in the infrastructure decade, and we're going to be building roads and bridges. And in fact, I get a lot of calls about people, hey, if you can fix a bridge in Philadelphia in 10 days, why the hell is 696 taking months? And I'm like, I'd like to defer you to the Michigan Department of Transportation for that answer. But there are so many projects underway in this country. But what states can do now under bipartisan infrastructure law is they have the flexibility. If they want to use their dollars for technology deployments, that is completely an eligible use. It doesn't have to be relying on grant programs to get there. And so then it becomes the ROI and the cost-benefit analysis of I can fix a bunch of roads and bridges or I can deploy technology at scale. This is where the private sector has to come in and help out, whether it's organizations like 5GAA, ITS America, IBTTA and others that are looking at the technology components and the companies themselves, because one of the challenges in technology is when I go out and procure technology as a state DOT or a city, it'll take me 2 or 3 years to get through the procurement process. So I'm buying something that is 3 years old by the time I deploy it, and then you're going to hit me up for license fees, and I've got to buy the latest and greatest version. And a road is going to have a certain deterioration curve. Software and technology enhancements can't have a expiration date where by the time I deploy it, it's already out of date, and now somebody's saying, what idiot thought this was a good idea? So we're going to have to work in partnerships, a lot of opportunity for public-private partnerships, but I think, again, I think Ann Arbor's got some great stuff going on. Detroit's got some great stuff going on. Michigan has been pushing in this space, so it's great to see that there is leadership out there.
Okay, I want to thank you for your time. Please join me in thanking Administrator Bhatt. I believe there is a break now.
Yes, we have a 10-minute break, and then we have a DOT roundtable and a research presentation on sustainability and CAVs.